Welcome to this morning's panel discussion, where we'll be shedding some light on how innovation is driving economic growth in northern cities. I truly hope that you've fully enjoyed the conference so far. We've been absolutely delighted to welcome Reset Connect to Leeds. My name is Natalie Allen, and I'm Head of Business Partnerships at Leeds Beckett University. And as someone who works right at the centre of innovation, I'm really delighted to be chairing the discussion today. As universities, we are truly woven into the fabric of society. It's through our ability to share knowledge, through activities such as teaching and research, that we offer and fulfil our civic duties and impact, making change to real people's lives. As an anchor institution, this is well and truly embedded in the DNA of Leeds Beckett. We know that innovation and addressing challenges don't happen in isolation. We're only part of the puzzle, and it's through genuine partnership working that real change can be made. And at Leeds Beckett, we're really committed to supporting greener, sustainable communities, which is why we've made this one of our strategic research and knowledge exchange themes. As a trusted partner to our policy colleagues and businesses, through collaborative innovation, we're supporting businesses to decarbonise, to turn decarbonisation into growth opportunities. Decarbonisation can seem really daunting for small businesses, with uncertainties around net zero, cost concerns, limited resources. However, sustainability really can drive innovation, efficiency, and long-term resilience beyond just that of an environmental responsibility. For example, the innovation projects that we're delivering at Leeds Beckett, such as working with Aquatrust, who are advancing water quality management through smart technology, New Green, who are converting NHS clinical waste into low-carbon construction materials, Control Station, who are embedding AI into their IoT platform to optimise operations and cut energy use, and Quality Bearings Online, who are reducing Scope 3 emissions by developing systems that minimise carbon emission and support a more sustainable global supply chain. In my role, I have the absolute pleasure of developing and leading programmes of business support that really do drive innovation and economic growth in our region. I'm really proud to chair the West Yorkshire Economic Development Group on behalf of Yorkshire universities and really activating that policy and academic partnership. So for me, taking a real place-based approach to thinking about today's question, I think that we have should be full of optimism really in our northern cities. Our universities really do drive collaboration, and through devolution we've seen that we've got a clear plan for growth and a real opportunity to work with our local and regional government and our business community. And that, coupled with some genuine confidence from our national government, which we've seen come through in funding pots such as the West Yorkshire Investment Zone of 160 million and the recent announcement of the Local Innovation Partnership Fund for 30 million. So together I think we've got real opportunities to create real impact. I'm now very excited to welcome our panel to introduce themselves today. We've got a real live triple helix in action. That's policy making, that's industry and universities coming together.
Would you like?
We got our friend? Oh yes, here. And pardon me, sorry. Triple helix, quadruple helix, I mean. Today we're joined by one of our colleagues from our autonomous community. Innovation in action. Fantastic. Ed, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Ed Whiting. I'm the Chief Executive of Leeds City Council. I've been in post for about 13 months, so getting my arms around big job and looking forward to talking today. And we can all get used to being upstaged by our autonomous friends.
Hello everyone, I'm Steve Garlick, the Strategic and Advisory Lead for Retrofit and Decarbonisation at BDP. We're an international practice of architects, engineers, sustainability consultants, but international in expertise and local in knowledge. So really excited to be involved in some great projects in the area. We're looking at the Ellen Road Stadium, this building actually, the next phase of this building, and also the Leeds Railway Station. So that local knowledge really coming through. And what links BDP's work together for me is our focus on place-based decarbonisation and low-energy retrofit, and really specifically how we can use those to drive real broad, holistic, positive improvements in our built environment.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm Ryan Case. I'm Public Affairs Manager for Starship Technologies, so that little guy is my mate. We've got about 3,500 autonomous delivery robots across the globe, but my job primarily is working with national governments and local government to enable us to take the technology into local communities, such as places like Leeds.
Fantastic. Sarah?
Hello. My name's Sarah Tulip. I do a number of things. At the moment, I'm co-founder for an organisation called Metrotech, which is building green data centres. So hopefully I'll get an opportunity to talk about that. I also am an advisor to a business which I'm very passionate about called Zenergy, which is around decentralising solar and using social housing to create or reduce fuel poverty. I have a consultancy called And Then Consulting, where I work fractionally with fast growth technology businesses. And I've worked very closely with Leeds City Council over 6 or 7 years now as part of their inclusive growth strategy to be their ambassador for Leeds as a digital city.
Thank you. Wow, what a panel. So I'm going to come to you first, Ed, if that's okay. So Leeds has set out really strong aspirations within the Leeds ambitions, prioritising 4 key areas, really focusing on becoming a thriving city with equity, helping residents fulfil their full potential, supporting people in the community, building resilience and leading the first net zero and nature positive city. What opportunities and challenges do you foresee in harnessing innovation to achieve these goals?
Big question, and quite a mouthful of that. So we talk about our Leeds ambitions. There are 4 of them. I find the one-word bit is easier to remember. So healthy, thriving, growing, resilient. Those are our 4 ambitions. And if I say a little bit about how we're thinking about the city as a whole, when I started the job, and it feels like this at the minute, it feels like a struggle just to get over the line kind of each month, each year. Certainly felt like that in local government for a while. I know for many businesses around the city, it can also feel like that. And when the world is the way it is at the minute, it doubly feels like that each morning when you switch on the news. But in Leeds, we have the foundations of a really exciting decade ahead. So we are growing. We are a productive city. We have higher productivity growth than any other city, including London, over the last 10 years. And for me, what I was keen to do is for us as a council city, is try and harness that sense of optimism in a real way, looking at the challenges as well. So I'll answer the question in a sec. But we're thinking about the 3 things that get us there. The economic vision. So adding £20 billion of GVA over the next 10 years, 100,000 jobs. That is through loving the economy we have. 60% of our economy is in services, financial business, professional services, digital and data and tech. How do we support that? And that could be through growth of beautiful places to live, making Leeds an incredible place to live, including B&H positive city. Secondly, Leeds ambitions. So there's 4 ways to tackle poverty and inequality in our city. We are growing and we're productive, but we have 20% of the city living in relative poverty. We have a life expectancy gap of 12 years between Hunslet, pretty much where we are here, and Harewood in the northeast of the city. Those 2 things are moral injustices that it's our job to tackle as a city together. So that healthy, how do we close life expectancy gap? Thriving, how do we live together as communities? Growing, how do we grow the economy and ensure that it reaches every part of the city? And resilient, how do we become a nature positive city, including tackle net zero? The way that we're doing it, the opportunities, innovation is at the heart of that. The innovation arc, bringing together the NHS, those big anchors we have in the city, with the hospital, with innovators around the innovation arc itself. Data, the data centre that Microsoft are developing around Skelton Grange will be, a really exciting sort of honeypot for development around the coming years. But also looking honestly at the challenges too. Our Director of Public Health did a really interesting report last summer on what heat and changes in heat will do for cities. And we're spending a lot of time working on that and thinking about how we adapt as a city to that, including how we equip our buildings for that, how we equip our buildings to support our residents better, including things like warm homes, as well as sort of homes that are sort of able to withstand heat as well. So a lot of work to both grab those opportunities, but look at how opportunities and growth support the development of our city in a way that touches every part. Innovation, new ideas, trying new stuff here, learning from that, bringing people into Leeds and investing in Leeds, all part of the picture together. But for us, those sort of constructs, economic vision, a council plan, by the way, that gets us to sustainability, which would be quite a big deal for us, and the ambitions for the city as a whole, those are the things that will drive our growth as a city.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ed. So, yeah, lots of optimism, but still recognising that there's challenges ahead. On the challenge piece, Sarah, if I come to you, can you share an example of how you're using innovation, renewable energy solutions to tackle social challenges like fuel poverty, whilst also demonstrating how public and private sector collaborations really do accelerate impact?
Yeah. So I've been really lucky to get involved with a business over the last 6 months called Zenergy. They're a wider organisation that have had massive impact in the private sector and also in commercial around using renewables to, reduce bills for large organisations and actually based here in the region. The founder, Julian, came to me and said, this concept basically is that we as the private sector fund this. At the moment, there are 27.5 million homes in the UK living in fuel poverty. That if you look at the landlords, a lot of them are public sector landlords. An example would be Leeds City Council has these properties, but Leeds City Council is being underinvested in, and the money that they get is less and less year on year. And then they're being asked to meet reasonable standards, and those people who are the tenants living in those properties are probably the ones who are sat in fuel poverty. They're probably the people who are choosing whether they eat or whether they heat their homes. And he really wanted to tackle this. And so this is a private funded project where they will go to, and already actually we're in advanced talks with Leeds, Doncaster, Sheffield, so we're having these conversations and looking to put the first trial in. But actually the private sector will go away and raise the money to fund this. We will use solar, we will use battery, and we will use an AI trading system. And through that, we'll be able to, the moment we put it onto the property, reduce the bills for the tenants by 25%. And within 5 to 6 years, we will reduce it when it is paid off. We reduce their bills by 50%. So at a time right now when we hear what's going on in the world with regards to energy costs and fuel costs, this could be hugely impactful. And it's a way that I think that people in the private sector who understand this isn't just about helping people in social housing. Actually, there are many other benefits to this, because if you want to go and build a solar farm, and there's huge conversations going on in Doncaster, they want to build it on greenbelt land, everyone's opposing it, and actually all that money that is made from that will go back into a large corporation. This is an opportunity to build a decentralized solar farm which is more efficient. It will raise the EPC standards on properties. It will reduce people's bills, and then also at the end of the 5 or 6 years when that's paid off, money will go back in to whoever the landlord is, with regards to them then having the opportunity to use their profits as an income stream to work with those tenants and improve it further. So for me, this is a really special example, and everybody wins. Yeah. But actually, we're also doing a great big green project that's, I think, going to be hugely impactful. So I'm really proud to be involved with that at the minute.
You should be. It sounds absolutely incredible, Sarah. I really do think it does. And it just highlights that public-private sector partnership, but also reinforces that local piece, that actually local businesses being innovated and working together to make change. I think that's really critical. Thinking about homes and changing people's lives. Steve, I'm going to come to you because everybody agrees that retrofit is really critical to net zero, but progress does really remain slow. So from your experience, are today's barriers to retrofit technical, financial, regulatory, cultural, all of the above? Which is the hardest one for us to shift?
That's a really interesting question. And I think actually the direction that this conversation is going is so reassuring, because I think fundamentally, we need to see decarbonisation and retrofit not just as technical challenges. These have implications and potential benefits right across society, across ecology and the environment. So, in terms of technical challenges, fundamentally, we know how to retrofit buildings to very high standards, and we know how to do it safely. Now, it's not always done that way, and we need targets and standards in place to ensure that it is. But building physics awareness is rising, and actually we're seeing some really positive results. Financially, retrofit, for instance, does increase costs and uncertainty to begin with. But there's rising awareness that actually as a whole life assessment, it stacks up. And actually, it's something that we absolutely have to do. I'm going to look and see if anybody falls off their chair when I say this, but across a non-domestic sector, 70 to 80% of buildings are at risk of becoming unlettable stranded assets in the near future based on forthcoming energy efficiency minimum standards. So we have an enormous challenge and we have to do it very quickly. So actually the financial case is not just do nothing anymore, because do nothing is going to cause an awful lot of lost value across our built environment. Regulatory, we're still relying on regulations that lean towards minimum compliance, and that is a crucial issue that we need to get over. But we're seeing local authorities doing amazing things in actually pushing and leading the way. Planning, for instance, requiring additional standards over and above. And so we're seeing real positive direction. Culture. Now, this is the one that's both hardest and possibly most beneficial to change. And typically estate owners and building owners have seen buildings as isolated assets, retrofit and decarbonisation as technical challenges purely, but we need to understand our estates and buildings as complex ecosystems. People interacting with building services, climate change, building physics, all interacting in ways that make or break our best laid plans, essentially. So we need to change the way that we see our estates and understand our buildings as complex ecosystems. And we need to take a whole building and whole estate approach, and we need to bring people along on the journey, because if they're not involved, they don't understand how to use those buildings or estates to full efficiencies, then everything we do will be undermined.
It's a really good point, and I think that people and culture piece often gets missed, but it can often be the biggest barrier. I know we've had this conversation, haven't we, Ryan, before, and we know that driving innovation is really important to fueling economic growth. It's really essential to supporting the mission and transition to net zero, but we know that there's sometimes that conflict between sustainability and innovation. How do you think we can address society's concerns around these things?
Yeah, I think when we talk about sustainability, it's important to not just focus on the environmental element of that. There's the economic sustainability, and also thinking about the generations of the future and creating a system that works for them. In terms of public acceptance, one of the things that we come up against quite often is that there is no underpinning regulation for our sector or similar sectors. For a bit of context, the most up-to-date law that applies to autonomous robots is from 1835. Wow. And the argument that we have with DFT is that probably they didn't think about robots back then. Because there's that lack of regulation and government sort of push to move that forward, that results in a situation where the public have a bit of distrust in it. But actually, if you take people with it and you demonstrate to them that actually innovation has a purpose and that it's not just innovation for innovation's sake, then they will come on that journey quite well with you. And what we're finding in northern cities, Leeds, Ed, we've got quite a lot of robots in Leeds now. What we are finding with northern cities is that they are much more open to innovation. So I go and talk to councils quite a lot. We launched in Sunderland recently. Councils in the north have roles such as director of AI or director of smart cities, whereas down south they still have ones called director of public realm and things like that. So it's really exciting to see that the northern cities are taking that forward, but without underpinning regulation, market's going to be left behind. The UK is so far behind at the minute.
Yeah, it's really challenging, but it's great to hear that you say actually in the north, we're ready for innovation, aren't we? We've got the people in the post, we're ready to go.
I mean, if we look, Barnsley was made the UK's first tech town, and being a Barnsley lad, I don't imagine I ever thought that would happen.
Fantastic. Ed, back to you. So across energy, transport and housing and industry, where are you seeing the most meaningful innovations already making a difference? And from a city perspective, how are we nurturing these innovations to start, to scale and to grow?
So I would say just something on the north, just to have in the back of your mind, and it's a bit of arcane local government trivia, but in the north, you tend to have local authorities that cover a whole city or a whole town So for us, we're all of Leeds, and actually we're all of Leeds and then some. We go out to Wetherby and in the south as well. That means that if you work with one local authority, you can have a conversation that really does cover quite a chunky geography. Now in the south, a lot of London particularly, very dense area, you've got to work with whatever it is, 30 boroughs to get stuff done across a city. I think that's a competitive advantage that we have in the north, that we can do a lot with as we go. And for us, it means that we can take a managed risk with something like Starship and see what's the benefit going to be. Just in terms of how we nurture innovation, support, start and grow, I've talked a bit about how we think about the innovation ecosystem, specifically in the kind of climate and resilience area. We've got a few that are working well that we want to go further on. Leeds Pipes district heat network that is now supplying the city centre over 430 green jobs, and that's an important way to nurture that growth, is to make sure people get good jobs out of it. 2,000 residential properties connected, and we want to take it further. It's heating our council buildings, so we are grateful for it every day as the heat is sort of churning its way through our buildings. We're making progress on EV, and we're top 20% nationally for EV charging, 690 public chargers. We want to do more, but making Leeds an EV-friendly city so that you get less range anxiety here. That's a good thing. And then we're trying to really sort of push on solar on buildings as well. We've got this amazing thing out near Winmore called the Aerium, and if you have sort of an hour or so free, pop out there. It's a gigantic greenhouse where we have all the seeds that are then put into all of Leeds' parks. That's now got a ton of solar panels on the roof, and that is ensuring that building, which is a giant bit of glass, is much more energy resilient than it used to be. For me, those three examples speak to the role that local authorities have got in this, which is, you mentioned planning earlier. How do you set and shape infrastructure so that it develops in a way that is also going to create those good jobs and accelerate those, for us, Leeds ambitions, the resilience transition that we want to see? Not always easy, because, we have to build, but building responsibly as we go is really important. And I think for us as local authorities, alongside combined authorities, other big providers of infrastructure, how do you think about the growth and development of a place and the things that you do in a way that then shapes and creates markets? And as I say, starting with the advantage we have in the north, I think you're going to see more of that over coming years.
That sounds great, Ed, because I think those ambitions really, that they're so intrinsically linked, aren't they? And it sounds like actually you've got the inner workings of a whole systems approach within the local authority, so it's not its own barrier. So that's really, really refreshing.
We're getting there.
Yeah, it sounds good. Steve, just on that kind of innovation piece, do you think we're currently investing more effort into new solutions, or should we be investing into scaling ones that work? And do you think we've got that balance right? Because I know you work across the north, across the globe, so it'd be interesting to hear from you.
It's a very nuanced discussion, and I think we've seen here at the conference and we're seeing here today that there's some genuinely powerful new solutions and new innovations that can help us drive decarbonisation. We are, really benefiting from aggregating estate information to help us understand estates better and help to understand investment decisions as we advise both private and public clients. Really genuinely powerful innovation, both in terms of high technology and sometimes less glamorous things, like on the Holtdales project that I worked with Equans on, deep decarbonisation of 198 social housing properties. Actually, the innovation there was us working with Access Building Products to develop a insulated meter box. Now, an insulated meter box isn't a high technology thing, but it solved a real issue in retrofit, which is the risk of thermal bridging and the risk of unintended consequences. So actually, striving for innovation is immensely powerful. What we can't do is lose sight of what we know works. And we know that not only do we create more efficient buildings and estates through good design and low energy retrofit, but we also make them more climate resilient, as we've said. We protect those most vulnerable in society from overheating, and we create better, more successful places. So innovation in how we look at buildings is very helpful as well. In transforming estates, right-sizing them, sometimes our clients actually hold on to much more estate than they need. So we can drive efficiencies by right-sizing and finding actually 80% of your estate is adequate. And in doing so, we can create even better places. We can consolidate student unions and actually, do placemaking as part of our approach. So I think that's it. I think, innovation is immensely powerful. I think it's supporting what we know is tried and tested design and the ways we look at adaptive reuse of estates. And it's really supporting what we're doing. It also helps because we have such a skills gap in the industry. We need to upskill very quickly. We have an immense challenge and we need a lot of people to be involved. So it can help us in the meantime support decision making and understanding assets.
Thank you. And I think some of that is that regulatory piece we've talked about. It's a barrier, but also actually it makes sure we're doing things properly and we're doing things safely. And just on that piece, Ryan, we've talked about some of the barriers to innovation, particularly for the work that you're doing. And we've talked about that regulation being a barrier. How can or have northern cities really helped you to overcome some of these barriers?
I would say by actually just being brave and taking that leap and actually seeing things like our robots, but other things like agri-tech and other areas, and taking that and seeing it as part of the public infrastructure and the future vision of an area and building it into the economic plans for an area as well. Some areas are a bit more hesitant because they'll say things like, I'm going to pick Kipex in Leeds where we've got robots. At first, the council were like, the pavements are very narrow and this sort of stuff. But actually, the technology will adapt to the infrastructure that is already there. And places in the north are just really keen for it. And also when we talk to the public in the north feel forgotten quite often. So by having that two-prong approach, really supportive local government, really supportive Metro Mayor, so Mayor of West Yorkshire is incredibly supportive of the robots. So if you build that sort of joined up thinking across society, across local government and across business, then that's how we're getting through in the northern cities. And I'm not going to mention which ones, but we're about to launch another 3 northern cities in the next 3 weeks.
Oh, fantastic. So you really are on a growth journey, aren't you? Yeah. And a little bit of northern grit, shall we say, in there as well?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. And people love the robots. And just walking here, people stop me because and it is that element of it's not something that happens to the north. Yes. So places like Leeds are just embracing.
We are imagining that everywhere you go, you're followed by one of these things. So
he is. I saw him this morning.
This one actually lives. This one lives in my car. This one was down in Stevenage yesterday. It goes all over.
Fantastic. Sarah, just on that, what is unique about the innovation culture in northern businesses? Because we've heard from Ryan, it feels like there's something about the north.
Right. I think there's a few things. So. Where to start? I think we have to look at our heritage and our history, right? The Industrial Revolution was started in the north of England. We were a powerhouse then, and I'm sure we'll be a powerhouse now. And if you look at, I guess the ecosystems. In fact, I'll take it back a step. I personally, controversial opinion, have watched money flow into London and the southeast for a long time. And I think that particularly the north has been pitched against each other, city by city, to get these pots of money. And little by little, massive underinvestment has happened in the north of England. And you look at everything, you look at transport, you look at schools, you look at, technology infrastructure, and then you look at actually what's happened, and innovation has happened in abundance. And I think that what has happened, it's like no matter what happened, the North went and fought. We found other ways to do it without the funding, without the connectivity. We've got that grit within us. And so maybe we've learned a little bit ahead of other people that in the South that collaboration is a real route to do this. So if I look at this panel, apart from Stu, who's not generally not based in Leeds 100%, but everybody else I know here, right? And we're across private sector, across public sector, we're across education. We've learned how to collaborate and work together. And I think that started out very much when I think about a good example is Leeds digital ecosystem. We've had Leeds Digital Festival. That's turned into Leeds Digital. That's turned into a board where we come together. That's turned into something around across West Yorkshire. And I think that Leeds learned to work together. And then there was going to be, WICA and a mayor. And at first there was a lot of resilience, and we don't want to do that. We don't want someone to tell us what to do. But actually, if we collaborate, we'll work together. And I see that we've learnt those lessons. And now I'm seeing a lot more pan-northern initiatives. So I think that a really good example was the AI growth zones, and everybody was pitted against each other. But actually, I think a lesson really learnt from that was, why don't we just come together as a region? Why don't we come together as a north and actually working together to bid to do things? Because we've become real specialists in cities, in towns, in regions across the north. We're world leading at stuff where we've been, like grassroots and developed it. So what I think is different is probably the heritage, like the universities would be another, like our education is like top notch worldwide. So we're building skills. People are coming out and people are staying more as well. So maybe a little bit ramble, maybe a bit controversial, but I think it's the grit of us having to like get our heads down, work hard. And the one thing I would say to finish it is I think that we have a lot of innovation, but money isn't thrown at the north the same way it's thrown at the south, or maybe San Francisco or the cities in the world. So when we solve problems and when we innovate, we do it to really solve a problem because we have a really good idea, because we know that it's going to be something that will make a change. And I think that's the other thing around our innovation. I think it's very much heart-based and place-based, and about transformation.
Couldn't agree more. I was listening to some feedback from a business panel the other day, and people outside of Leeds in particular, they talk about us because of partnerships. I think that place-based element is really interesting, and it's knowing when to turn it on and off. When is it West Yorkshire? When is it Leeds? When is it the North? And I think for me, I work across all those places, but it's whatever's going to spark that interaction and that engagement and bring people in and make things happen. But I 100% agree with you. It's about heart, and it's how do we shout louder about that, and how do we turn that into future opportunities. So couldn't agree more. Ed, how can innovation-led decarbonisation really translate into long-term economic growth? Steve's mentioned jobs and skills, rather than it being about short-term funding wins, something really sustainable.
So I think it's back to that question of how you're setting an infrastructure from our perspective, an infrastructure of the city, and then saying, well, look, here's where the opportunity is. How can you exploit that opportunity? So apprenticeships, huge part of the picture here in Leeds. I think it's a massive change we're going through in the economy as a whole, as a country. We need it. Construction skills particularly we're short of. We have a college of building that's doing brilliant work. For the first time in living memory, I think we're just not simply able to fund the demand that we have for FE in Leeds, which is a real worry. But I think part of our job is to make sure that we have to fix those problems, but also make sure the demand pipeline is there. So we're saying, look, we want apprentices doing these jobs. We want those jobs to then be sustainable jobs for the longer term, so that those good green jobs can be a big part of our economy. I mentioned a few examples of where they already are. Pipes network is one, a few hundred jobs created there. More on sort of new decarbonisation opportunities. From our perspective, is trying to create a long-term pathway so that firstly that demand can be stable and predictable, and then work with the skills economy to make sure that we've got FE colleges coming together and saying, all right, how do we best fuel this demand over the long term and create the pipeline of apprenticeship opportunities? And then the other bit is also why I would say local government's got an important role to play. We work with schools around Leeds, and part of it is, I remember when I grew up in Leeds, and when I was growing up, I don't think I met a single company in Leeds coming to any of the schools I went to, and I went to a few, saying, look, you could work in this city, and here's an amazing job you could do in Leeds. So immediately when I finished my A-levels, I wanted to get out. Now, that has changed. And I've been to careers fairs run by the AHEAD Partnership, run by others, that says, look, you're a 14-year-old girl in Leeds. Here are the digital jobs you could do right here in 5 years' time, 4 years' time, 3 years' time. And I think for us as local authority and as a system, it's how you shape and show that possibility to people at school, and sometimes even at primary school, so that they've got the seed planted in their mind that says you could do an amazing job in Leeds in 10, 20 years' time. So we have to do all those things, and we have to pay attention to all those things. And if we neglect any one of those elements, we'll miss the opportunity. But put them together through that partnership and through those different organisations working together, we've got an amazing economy to build here.
I absolutely agree. I've worked very closely with the AHEAD Partnership, and I think absolutely bringing businesses closer to people at a younger and younger age, that real aspiration. We always say it, don't we? If you can see it, you want to do it. And I think that's absolutely true. And I think one of the things that we're particularly working on at Leeds Beck is actually how do we create opportunities through the system So it's the higher level skills as well, so that right from an early age you can see a real clear pathway in your own city and stay and be and grow.
Can I just add one other part of that, and it is the role model part of it. See it to be it. You've got to have people who look like you, who have had the upbringing, the heritage you might carry with you. We're doing a lot more in the council, for instance, where we've had people who started as YTS trainees 40 years ago and have ended up being on the board at Leeds City Council and saying to people, look, you can do it. You can build an amazing career here from starting at 16. And I think whether it's by gender, by ethnicity, by background, socio-economic background, showing people in the city, these jobs are for you. That does take an active kind of, what I've heard very clearly, that takes a very active advocacy of people who look and sound and have the same background to the people that we want in those jobs in Leeds.
Thank you, Ed. So Steve, similar sort of vein, how do we really ensure that transition to zero emissions economy goes beyond targets and reporting? It's not just about a policy piece, is it? It's about delivering really long-term sustainable goals.
Yeah, I think crucially, to start with, we need to understand what success looks like and what outcomes look like. Now, historically, many standards and frameworks have concentrated on what happens before the building is designed and how is the building designed. But we need long-term thinking because we know that decarbonisation has to last a very long time. We know that our buildings need to perform through successive maintenance and replacement cycles. We need to know that our buildings and estates are still performing in 60 years, 100 years. So we need more successful places. Now, standards are incredibly important in driving the quality in our built environment. The most successful are the ones that look beyond practical completion. Building standards like, and I'm an expert advisor with the ACB, so forgive me for plugging it, but the ACB Carbon Light is one of those, the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard and others. So we need to make sure that what we're promising is delivered in practice. And it's a huge challenge in the built environment industry because most buildings, even those being built today, are not performing as designed. And that's the performance gap, and that's what we refer to. Now, how do we make sure that decarbonisation and retrofit are driving successful places as well? Because the buildings that will still be here in 100 years are the ones that are most successful. We need to make sure that homes are comfortable to live in, promote health and well-being. We need to make sure that office spaces and schools are productive environments with good indoor air quality. We need to be looking really broadly at what makes successful outputs. And so we need that ecosystem approach, understanding buildings and estates as ecosystems. But we also need to make sure that if we are to truly achieve success, we are committed as a society to it in the long term. A big part of that is training and upskilling, and it's absolutely crucial. Because if people don't know how to drive energy efficiency, actually everything we do in terms of technology and technical aspects will very quickly either start to fall apart as we start to maintain our buildings long term, or won't be understood and might be undermined. And we know that leads to really negative consequences in terms of health and well-being. So we need to look at what makes our buildings more successful and take the opportunity strategically when we look at decarbonisation and retrofit to say, how can we make our buildings more useful, more productive? How do we encourage health and well-being? How do we start to reduce the burden on the NHS in doing so? In terms of social housing, how do we stop people genuinely really being highly impacted in terms of their health by poor quality buildings? So it is a holistic approach, and some of the standards are really catching up now and helping to drive the change we need.
Thank you, Steve. And thinking about places and success and driving the success and keeping things going and making sure we can spread things, I guess. Thinking about your autonomous delivery colleagues that really do promise that cleaner last mile logistics. As you scale, you are scaling, you are growing. How can northern cities partner with you to pilot low energy, low water use, digital sustainability models that really can accelerate that local zero emissions growth?
I think going back to what I said previously, be brave and take that leap into it. But also think about it as part of the entire city approach or the county approach. So it's not just about we want to put robots out there doing delivery. Some statistics: 67% of customers in Leeds said that would have got in the car to go and get a bottle of milk, whereas they'll just happily get the robot to do it. So you need to take that approach, but also don't think that you need to change your existing infrastructure to be able to accommodate that new technology. And that seems to be quite a big worry amongst authorities around the area that, oh, well, you know, our streets were built in whatever decade or whatever century. That's not an issue for companies. Companies will adapt to what is there. So I would say just take that leap. And a lot of places think of it as a pilot. So they will say, oh, we'll do a pilot or we'll do a trial. But that's not really thinking future.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come back to what Sarah said about London. So, yeah, in my opinion, just ignore them. Just ignore the current 1835 Highways Act and go into it. I just want to touch on something that Ed said as well. So I go into schools with a robot quite often, primary schools and secondary schools. Yeah, I was born a year before the miners' strike, and my future was laid out that I would be working down the pit. But going into schools around here with a robot and saying, actually, these are here. We employ people in this area to do these sort of jobs. So we've got robot technicians. Our chief exec has said that when regulation comes, we will build a robot manufacturing centre in the UK. Yeah, if you've got the robots and you've got that sort of technology, then it will bring other jobs. So if you invest in agri-tech and other areas, those jobs will follow, but they're only going to follow once that regulation comes.
Absolutely. So there's a regulation, but you've come back to that hearts and minds piece again as well, haven't you? And I've got a question for you, Sarah, that's similar to that, really. So data centres are often perceived as environmentally harmful, yet are now powered by renewables, as you've explained before. They can even return heat to local communities. And from your experience, how can we shift that narrative to ensure that regions recognise that they don't see this as being a contentious subject between innovation and sustainable growth?
Okay. So it's interesting. People have a preconception of what a data center is, and there are different types of data center. And it was quite interesting. There was a survey done. It was the Turing Innovation Hub in Manchester, and there was a lot of AI companies in there, and they asked them some questions about what a data center was, what it did, and a lot of them said, well, I don't know, I just know that we need a data center. And I think that that's quite true, that a lot of people don't know what they are, but they have an opinion on them. Yeah. And there are data centers that are important for different reasons. So, Microsoft are, going to build this great big data center where people can put stuff in the cloud. Actually, there are other uses. The universities would be an example, are doing really high performance computing work, and they need a really close by data center with low latency cables where they can do things real time, really big powered computing. And we don't have that at the minute in Leeds. We don't have that in a commercial setting where somebody can go and plug into it. So that sort of data center is not massive. It's smaller. There's probably 150 high performance computing racks in there, and it doesn't need to be cooled with water. It can be cooled with heat, and that heat can then be redistributed into the city. So I think that, are they burning energy at the minute? Data centers currently, I think, are consuming 2.5% of UK electricity. That you can't build any more in the southeastern London because there's no power left. If you look at the comparison between Manchester and Leeds, there are, I think it's 5% of the data centre capacity we have over in Manchester. So we are, behind with regards to that piece of infrastructure. But what's quite interesting, I think, at the north and moving upwards is that we are investing in and we are innovating in renewable energy. So some of the big data centres are not happening at the moment because there is no power, and they're having to go away and innovate. So are they going to use nuclear? Are they going to use wind? What are the ways that we can do it? So in the north, we're actually innovating around power and data centers. But I think that, people who say, we don't want data centers here, you need to think about it, because it's a little bit like we don't have some of the rail capacity, we don't have some of the fiber capacity. These are all things that we need. The infrastructure is a really important part of the ecosystem. So if we don't build our infrastructure correctly, then we will not attract the global leaders in these organizations. We're talking about you're building a factory, but is there an organization that's building AI farms? Well, they can't do it here. So for me, I think that pragmatism is really important around data centers, and having the right sort of data centers who are responsible, using the right sort of energy and are innovating and want to be part of the ecosystem is really important.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think there's an education piece there, isn't there? People just jump to one thing and that's it. We don't want that. We're not having that. But I think you're right. Yeah, just educating people and pragmatism around innovation and growth what if we don't do this? Yeah.
And actually, a lot of the technology that we will need to be more green and more sustainable isn't invented or isn't commercially available yet, right? I think they say about 35% of the technology we need to hit our 2050 targets doesn't exist commercially. So without allowing innovation within our ecosystem and having the infrastructure to do it, they will go and build that somewhere else and we will miss out.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I've got one last question for all of you before we open up the floor to our audience. So if northern cities are serious about leading net zero emissions transition, what's the single most important decision that they need to take in the next 2 years?
So I don't think there's a magic bullet technology decision that will be path determining for every single northern city, but I do think it's the setting of an ambition and then getting everyone behind that ambition genuinely, because we can't do it by ourselves at all. So I think if northern cities continue to get their act together in the way that Sarah, Ryan, you've been talking about, we'll fly ahead. But if we don't have ambition, if we don't say what we're going to do on net zero and how we're going to evolve as economies, then we won't. If we don't bring people together around it, then we won't. We'll compete against each other and not make the progress we could. I think that is a path determining strategic decision, and I think everything else flows from that.
Thank you. Steve?
Maybe cheeky and give two answers.
Yes, you can.
I think fundamentally retrofit first policies that put retrofit and reuse front and centre as our default method for transforming our cities is genuinely helpful. But I think also we need to see this as an opportunity to drive positive growth across our built environment, more successful, more healthy, more productive buildings and places, placemaking being crucial. And in order to do so, we need to make sure that users, building occupants and stakeholders are part of the process, are active stakeholders in the process, because they're the ones that will determine whether what we do is successful or not. So leveraging that to make sure that we're spreading skills and knowledge throughout communities as well is a fundamental part of what we need to do.
Thank you, Steve. Ryan?
So quite similar to what Ed said, which is cities not to compete with each other. So from my experience, I went to Sunderland with a robot, and then I went to Newcastle with a robot, and the argument was, well, if they're having it, I'm having it. I'm off to Manchester next week because, well, these have got it, so we're going to have it. But actually, why not just all talk to each other and work it out together and embed that? But also look at other, don't be scared. Look at other countries. So the Nordics are so far in front. We've got about 700 robots in Finland now. So look at places like that. But also look at, and the mayor is not here, is she? No. Things like the tram. In China, they've got trams that operate using AI and doesn't involve massive infrastructure changes. They follow a specific painted line on the road and use AI to make movements around. And that does not involve digging the world up.
Thank you, Ryan. Sarah?
Some great responses. I think from my perspective, it's still a bit boring, and it always is a bit boring, but it's infrastructure. I know it's super boring, but we've fallen behind with regards to transport. Technology infrastructure will be the key for us and an enabler for us to do it, because if we haven't got the way to move freely back and forth, how do we super connect the north?
Yeah.
Because if we super connect the north in a technology way, then that might be our enabler rather than transport.
Brilliant. Thank you all. I'm going to open up to the floor now for questions. We have got a roving mic in the room. If you've got a particular question for a specific panellist, please let them know. Otherwise, colleagues, really happy for you to jump in and answer as you see fit. Any questions? Oh, thank you.
Hi, my question's for Sarah. I'm working with partners to deliver sort of clean tech infrastructure. So very relevant what you were talking about, particularly the data centre side of things. I've been speaking with clients in Ireland, and certainly you mentioned that was it 2% of the UK's energy was consumed by data centres. In Ireland, it's 23%, which I'm sure you know already. The approach they've taken is to basically stop any data centres being built without having its own energy infrastructure in place, so it doesn't have any impact on the grid. Do you see that going that way in the UK as well, given the restrictions we've got, particularly down south?
I think it's a really interesting question. So there's been a lot of change happening. So what had happened was, which is probably even before we get to this in England, is that people had been putting in planning for power and requesting the power and basically holding the power, and then they were reselling it on. So people were reselling power in the UK to data centres to make money out of data centres before they were even built. So I think there's a lot of changes going on around this at the moment. At the moment in West Yorkshire, we have power. So we are prime. We have the mains power that people can come and use. So people are really interested in us as a region at the moment. In London and the southeast, I think it's too late. I think that the power is almost already gone. So that I think that constrains the network. At the moment, I think it would be more sustainable and long-term better to be directing people to use alternative power. So I hear rumours and whispers that Microsoft are considering really innovative power solutions to power that data centre. If you look at the pipeline of data centres at the moment, most of them can't be built, most of the hyperscalers. So there are billions and billions and billions of pounds going into these data centres, and they can't power them because we don't actually have the power. So do I think they'll do that? Maybe, but at the moment, I think that they're already happening, that data centers can't be built, the hyperscalers cannot be built because there isn't the power already. So because it's so regional, it depends on where you go and do it. So I think we'll see a lot more Microsofts come to the region, but I couldn't say what legislation is going to do, but I know that already there are constraints in regions that are having massive effect.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's really great discussion. Thank you all very much for that. I'm really interested, you talked a lot about hearts and minds in this. I'm a communications consultant, so obviously I'm interested in this sort of thing. What is quite interesting is you all talk the language of opportunity, tackling inequality, resilience, innovation with a purpose. I don't think I heard anybody say, I think possibly you mentioned at the end, Natalie, the word net zero or cleaner, greener mentioned. To what extent is that a conscious decision to shift the narrative more towards the kind of outcomes of kind of the energy transition and things? Or is that a conscious decision, or is that just more where the conversation is going right now?
Does anybody want to pick that one up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy to start unless you want to go, Ed. I think there's been a lot of discussion over the years as to what net zero means, and also what climate neutrality means as well. I think there's an opportunity here for something bigger than just the discourse around the term. I think really what we're looking at is transformative sustainability actually happening, or the opportunity for it to happen, and whether that's across place-based solutions for nature-led solutions, as well as broader opportunities for sustainability environmentally, and sustainability in terms of people, bringing people along on the journey, improving lives, health and well-being. So for me, actually, net zero is crucial. We talk about what that means to clients quite a lot. I think fundamentally we need to make sure that we are using energy as efficiently as possible, using as little of it as possible, driving down demand, using technology to support that process, but really driving more broad social and environmental outcomes at the same time.
I'd briefly add to that. I think sort of beauty of being in a northern city here, I think for us as a local authority, same for just about any other local authority, we're in a place that calls a heat pump, and people want the language of outcomes is the language that we have to work in. The challenge we've had when talking about these leads ambitions, healthy, thriving, and resilient, say it 5 times a day, it is, what does this mean if you're a person living in Wetherby, Bermontoft, Hunslet, Guiseley, different parts of the city? Make it real for people's lives, or else they won't believe you're doing it. Now, we're living in a societal context where there's even more pressure on that to be even clearer about what this actually means. So for us, I think it's a semi-conscious thing. I don't think we're allergic to the term net zero, but I think when we talk about resilience, it has to wrap up what this feels like in people's day-to-day lives, which includes how we're resilient to future climate adaptation, as well as doing our bit on mitigation. So for us, it's a way of cutting through a bit and talking about what this means for our residents. And it's a great challenge to have, and we have it as an authority. Anytime you do anything, you've got to be clear about what it actually means for people's actual lives. So I'd say, as a sector, I was talking to one of the government ministers about this last week, as a sector, it's probably not a bad thing to have to do that and to have to say, living in a warm home, a better heated home, a better insulated home, probably going to feel better for you anyway. So we should talk about that. So I think semi-conscious, definitely not an allergy, but I think is probably where we're going to end up as a sector anyway.
Yeah, just sort of to echo that, the political discourse around the term net zero and what it means to people out there in the real world is, you ask one person what it means and you ask another and they say different things. But exactly what Ed said. So if we say to people, these robots or our robots are part of a wider approach that society's taking, and actually the robot means you don't have to get in your car, so you're not going to use your petrol, which is going to cost you money. And also, other surveys that we did in Leeds, on average, people said it doesn't sound a lot, but they said it saves them about 2 hours a week from having to pop to the shop. And, that's time you can invest doing other things. So making it real to people and seeing that the solution that you're putting in adds a benefit to their life, that's a better narrative to take people on that journey with you.
I agree, and people are part of the solution. So if people don't understand it, we're not going to move, are we? Absolutely. And I think I understand the question, because working for a university, my job is absolutely always about translation. I have to translate what our academic colleagues are saying so that I can translate it so that businesses understand. So I think for us, sometimes we have to just use the language that real people will understand. I think we've got time for one more question. This lady here.
Wait for a mic.
We can hear you, but yeah.
Somebody might not be able to have been hearing. So, talking about mitigation, practical action and real lives, and joined up northern cities. For years and years, I won't say how many, I've been wishing that West Yorkshire and Greater Manchester would speak to each other about public transport, because there's great public transport ticketing offers in West Yorkshire and similarly in Greater Manchester, but if you have to cross the border, which lots of us do, there aren't, and that makes it a lot more expensive, a lot more difficult to navigate, and a lot more likely for people to drive or not take the opportunities in the first place. So can you do something about that, please?
So would love to. Totally get that. I cross the border myself quite often. What a border it is. We do. I think a first step for West Yorkshire is just sorting our own house out, which we're trying to do through bus franchising and sort of getting the Weaver network working. I bet once we've got that, so I know it's yet more years. Once we were all operating on networks that are a smaller number of networks, I bet we're going to end up doing more together. I think about the North East as well. I think it is going to happen, but unfortunately, we've got our job to sort out our own house first. And I would say, for me, that has to come first, because getting around West Yorkshire is not very easy either at the minute, and we need to make that easier. But I do agree with you.
At least it's on the menu then.
I think we're going to get there, eventually.
And we do talk, don't we? Colleagues that work across the borders. We do find that regions do communicate. We do, particularly in an innovation landscape. We do talk to each other. We do share. We do learn.
I think we're getting better, is what I would say. I think that sometimes it's quite interesting. I'll be asked to go and speak at an event in Sheffield, and I'll get there, and it's exactly the same challenges, and it's exactly the same conversation, talking about skills and debate. And I think, oh goodness, we've just had that conversation there. But sometimes you are like in your own ecosystem, because it is about how your children, in their future, and your schools and your transport and the things that affect you day to day. So it is taking that time and having those forums and platforms to be able to speak together, I think, are really important, because otherwise you are just living in your world, because that is what matters. That's what pays the bills. And
can I just put a little brief hope of reassurance? We are spending a lot of time as chief execs and organisations between those different between the different cities around the north. I was talking weekly to my colleagues in Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield, Newcastle, working a lot with Bradford on our shared sort of future. We're all a bit more relaxed than we have been about what the other cities are doing. So Sheffield's doing amazing things in defence innovation that we're not doing here in Leeds. We're doing stuff that we're proud of in Leeds, but Sheffield are not doing stuff that we're doing in fintech and financial services. Manchester's offer changes by the day, but they're doing stuff that we're not doing that we absolutely adore, and vice versa. And we're all a little bit more chilled out about that than I think we have been. So I am optimistic. We are spending lots of time together. And actually the stuff that my predecessor, Tom Reardon's now leading across the north, that's starting to make a difference as well in terms of saying, I mean, the cross-border ticketing is one part of it, but how do all these bits come together better? So you said, Sarah, much more happening across the north. I am optimistic we're moving in the right direction. We've just got to move a bit faster.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So I started off this discussion with my glass, half full. That's the kind of person I am. But I think it still is after the conversation today. I think, there are challenges ahead. Absolutely. There always will be when we think about innovation and economic growth, and particularly the people piece. But I think that what I've heard is, let's have some ambition, let's be really optimistic, and let's continue working in partnership. So that brings us to a close for this session today. So please, can we just show our appreciation for our panellists? Thank you so much for your time.